a lot of us are not actually using Gen AI. We're using Edge AI, right? So we're basically, you walk into a room, Tim, you have maybe one of our video cameras in there. We're going to figure out that you're an object that has two eyes and a nose. We don't know it's Tim. We don't want to know it's Tim.
You're a human.
There is 1,000 jokes that we could make there, dude.
He's actually a pot. He's a flower pot with two eyes is what it is.
I have been called worse.
Oh no, not again.
Mini spheres are going to be popping up just like mushrooms all over the globe. AV and broadcast are mixing together. And where does AI belong in conference rooms? All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 709, recorded Friday, March 21st, 2025. AI governance. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of the biggest AV news and information we have gathered. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host, first and foremost from Laya Technologies, Jennifer Weaver. How are you, ma'am?
I'm well. Thanks, Tim, for having me.
Good to see you. Also with us, a UC and AV expert extraordinaire, happens to be a free agent at the moment, Mr. Neil Flooster, all the way from the UK. Welcome, sir.
Tim, how are you doing? You recovering from Orlando?
No, I am not. I am not recovering. I will explain that in a second. And last but not least, a gentleman that I actually got to meet physically in person in Barcelona, along with Neil. We got to hang out in Barcelona on Saturday. Nathan Coutinho from Logitech. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me on. Good to see everyone.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Neil mentioned it. I was at Enterprise Connect this week. That kind of flavored a couple of the stories that we're doing. Enterprise Connect 2025 in Orlando. I have a blog that I'm not quite finished yet. It was a rough travel week. I know this is first world problems. I know I'm whining. That's all I'm going to try to say about it. But yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of sleep this week, and the sleep I had was just not great. So let's just kind of get onto this and see if I can't recover. First story actually comes to us from our friends over at UC today, taking a look at AI and the UC space. They've got an article talking very much about AI and how AI, quote unquote, is revolutionizing unified communications. Now, before companies leverage AI, according to the article, they need to get their house in order. That is an understatement. It means taking a hard look at their current UC stack, identifying underused, utilized licenses, outdated systems, and inefficiencies that can derail progress. It also means taking a look at security and accessibility levels. Not everybody needs to see the HR documents on disciplinary actions. And what I mean is this, is if you start leveraging AI tools, and I'll pick on Copilot for a second, if you don't set certain levels, like accessibility levels, and you turn it on, then everybody can see everything. And I mean everybody can see everything. That means that I could go in, and if I was a member of an employee of your company, I could go in and I could see every disciplinary action that we had. I guess against me, but against anybody. So all these things you got to kind of tackle here before you start bringing AI into the mix. Neil, we'll start with you on this. How can organizations, quite frankly, realistically assess whether their existing stack is ready for AI and whether their company is ready to turn this on?
It's an interesting, again, AI is everywhere, and I think there's two forms. There's the kind of like, we'll put AI, the two letters after our existing product and pretend that we're part of the gang or we're on the bandwagon and try and market it, versus actually some companies are doing something clever. In NetSpeak's a great example of that. They've got their LLM and doing some stuff around management. I think you need to treat it like a physical employee. When you're talking about Active Directory and roles and permissions and being able to access network shared drives, documents, management systems for video conferencing and AV, you really need to look at it as a role-based permissions in Active Directory and what it can and can't see. And there are examples out there of it going out and finding stuff because it has free reign. And I guess people potentially want the advantages of AI, but to do that, the disadvantage is you've got to give up some freedom or some privacy or something, because if you don't, then it's only, if it hasn't got all the data and can't access all that data, it's not that intelligent really. So it's that balance between, I remember when I first got on Alexa, it was like, you had to give away the privacy of it listening to you all the time versus it can turn on your lights and your switches and all the rest of it. And it's like, well, I'll give up that privacy and give that to Amazon because I want the benefit of that. And I think it's very similar as AI is coming into the world of the corporate enterprise world and space, that obviously you've got to give it some level of access to get that capability that you want it to do all those cool things for you. So IT departments need to look at it, and I guess it depends whether you're coming from a Microsoft Copilot in your IT manager, or if you're coming to it from a AVUC manager who's managing meeting rooms and cameras and mics and things like that. And again, they need to talk to each other and define those policies and those rules between, the world of my Active Directory and file storage versus my cameras and management tools for my video system.
Yeah, Jennifer, same kind of question there is what do they need? And a little bit of what Neil said there, because he makes a good point there, is how much privacy are we willing to give up?
Well, you also have to remember there's the free version, like the open platform version of AI and Copilot, and then there's the internal company version of AI, and Copilot. So it's going to also come down to the education of everybody in the company to say, if you want to find company information, don't use the open platform of Copilot. And if you are in R&D and you need to figure out the remainder of a code or where something's broken, don't put proprietary company information on the open platform of AI. You want to do that internally. So companies have to need to look at that, because the more I've started to learn about AI, the more I've started to use AI, and especially Copilot, it is extremely beneficial. Yeah. I'm not putting proprietary information in there. I'm asking for information. So I'm asking for it to search the web for things. But I'm also realizing I can do this with internal documents now and help me put together, pamphlets and talking points when I'm having a meeting and going into a meeting. So you don't want it to pull all of the R&D talking points if you just want to sit and have a brief video conference meeting or Zoom Teams meeting with somebody about general information of your company. You don't want it to start, doing all the NDA stuff because it has access to it. So yeah, it's a lot of understanding the protocols, but also understanding there's some good use for it for individuals, but we have to be trained on the right way to use it.
That whole training is a whole nother conversation that we should probably have someday. Nathan, how are we balancing the cost versus the benefits versus the security and privacy?
Enterprise architects and governance teams are like, we told you so. Like, you still need us, right? These are very important things that we need to think about because you have to understand where the data is going, how the applications are using it. We've already been through this with cloud, quite honestly, except now it's at a whole different level, right? It's like 10 times faster. It's growing much, much faster than we think about. So I want to address a couple things. Number one, you have to think about the company you're using, where they store their data. So this is all about privacy, but the problem is that there's so many AI apps out there now, right? If you don't have the right governance and the controls in place, people are going to start downloading this stuff and putting them on their phones and their laptops, right? So again, governance is really, really important. This is not a new thing. For most enterprises that have an entire slew of enterprise architects and governance teams, they already know how to protect themselves against this. However, because it's moving so fast, now you need to think about is it a reputable company? For example, I've seen, and I've talked about this on a different show, and I just don't remember when, but every now and then on LinkedIn, we'll see a post of someone saying, these are the top 10 AI tools that have saved, me all this time. And I've been resisting for the longest time to click on any of those links until one day I had 5 minutes. I'm like, let's just give it a try. I didn't try the tools. I went to their websites and I tried to figure out where the data is stored. Not one of them I could figure out where they were. So that's a really good example of the amount of different things that are coming out. And people are reposting on it. I don't blame the folks that are like, they see a really cool piece of content. They repost it thinking that it's going to be great, but it's maybe not, right? So again, governance is super important. You have to understand with any of these tools. And I always default to, let's go with the biggest brand name, like Microsoft and Zoom. And these are all great companies that take privacy very, very seriously. It doesn't mean you should just look the other way. You should do your own investigations, just like cloud, right? Just like we were worried about storing our data in the cloud. But so I think that's your ground level. That's a number one thing you have to do. From an AI perspective, there's so much. Neil mentioned it, so did Jennifer. There's a lot that's out there, but you also have to compartmentalize which AI you're using for what. So from a VC AV perspective, a lot of us are not actually using Gen AI. We're using Edge AI, right? So we're basically, you walk into a room, Tim, you have maybe one of our video cameras in there. We're going to figure out that you're an object that has two eyes and a nose. We don't know it's Tim. We don't want to know it's Tim. We're not identifying you as a person. We're identifying you as a person of interest that we want to frame correctly, right? That sounds terrible, but that's what we're
You're
doing.
human.
There is 1,000
You're
jokes that we
human.
could make there, dude.
He's actually a pot. He's a flower pot with two eyes is what it is.
I have been called worse.
Yeah, my AI guy is going to kill me. But so basically the concept is simple, right? We're not identifying you as, as a person that we can then say, hey, Tim said all these things, blah, blah, blah. We're basically trying to find the best video, the best audio, and then send it to the cloud provider, like a Microsoft or Zoom or Google. Then they use Gen AI technologies. That's not Edge AI. That's full on Gen AI. If you've given it permission, you have to opt in. All these platforms, right? The end user has to opt in for voice and face. Even the company, at the company level, this is where we were talking about earlier about governance. If the company does not want to support it, they can turn it off right at the top. But then that's what the clear audio and video that we submit, right, to the provider is what makes all these features work properly, like proper summaries and proper name identification. So you have to understand architecturally how this all works. You have to have a solid governance plan in place, and then decide as a company, is this something we want to do? And to what Neil said really well, what do you want to give up? Because you're going to have to give up something at some point. It may not be pure privacy, but the fact that everyone know Nathan said something in a meeting, that may not be something you want to give out necessarily. So I think it's a healthy balance.
This story comes to us from our friends over at AV Magazine. The iconic Las Vegas Sphere may soon have smaller siblings. The Sphere Entertainment, babies, yes. I like what mini spheres. They're exploring mini spheres. These are scaled down versions of the immersive venue that is in Las Vegas. Looking to be about 5,000 attendees for context. Maxed out, the Sphere in Vegas holds 20,000 roughly. That when I say maxed out, that is in addition to the stadium seating. You can also put seats on the show floor or on the floor of the venue as well, so they can get up to 20,000 people in that Sphere. Rough numbers, kids. The original was $2.3 billion. Really high resolution. These smaller ones, according to the article, they're looking to quote unquote democratize access to the exact same experience. Now, artists with more modest budgets, folks that are trying to do really interactive experiences, they could leverage the same cutting edge technology without the steep production demands of the Vegas flagship. Jennifer, we'll start with you on this. From an AV and a content creation standpoint, how can artists, how can producers, how can the industry make immersive visuals more sustainable and reusable across venues like these mini spheres?
If they're going to be all over, right, that obviously that's going to be something that's beneficial for any type of artist or Broadway play company that wants to get in, because they can create it if they're all in the same size. Content's going to be done, they're going to be there, so it's not a one-off like the Sphere is, right? You can budget for that, move around, make your money. That I think it's great. The one thing that I looked at and going, oh, it's 5,000 seats. Yeah, it's really cool, but then what's going to end up to the price of that ticket, right? That's the other thing that you go in, because you're going to have to create all of this. Therefore, the pricing to cover all of this is probably going to go up, right? Like, I don't want to pay $200 to go see somebody in the Sphere when I can go see them at, the Hard Rock for, $75. But then if I put my educational hat on and go, this is now opening up an opportunity for schools, high school, college, where these organizations, these artists, these Broadway plays, these vendors, whatever they're doing, can now start to reach out and say, we have the ability to train these students. We have the ability to get their ideas on some content creation. We have the ability to now maybe pay them to do it, which would probably be a lot less than paying somebody that really knows all of this, and now open it up for not only accessibility for people to come in and see it that don't have the ability to travel, but now I'm doing an education, because we need that, right? We all know that the AV industry, and in a nutshell, is dying off with the type of young people that are coming in. We're not driving them into the industry, so give them the reason to say, I could do this and I can design this. I'm looking at it from that aspect and saying we can probably really grow education of the industry with it, and not so much of the price point of what it's going to cost.
Nathan, Jennifer, you raised a good point there, and that is ticket prices. Just for reference, the initial U2 show, that was the one that kicked it off. I know this because I did look into the tickets, and I know a couple people that went, $500 to $600 as a starting point. I am of a certain age and of a certain generation that I do love U2. Had I been in Vegas, I probably would have paid that. So would you pay $500 in St. Louis to see a smaller version of that, right? Would you pay it in, out in Chicago, in New York, or even Austin, Texas? So, is this really something that's going to help, as this article says, democratize this experience and help, the industry kind of push forward the idea that we are really immersive and we've got some really kick butt stuff?
So one of the things I'll take away from what Jennifer said is, like, I probably will have some job security if there's no younger people coming into we all will, actually, but that's not what we want, obviously. I mean, we want job security. Now, see, I've opened my mouth and inserted a foot. So anyway, so I think this is a great idea, but I would echo the concern on price, because, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Indiana, Terre Haute, Indiana, you might not be able to get $500 per ticket. Maybe Taylor Swift, for sure. I mean, of course, that will definitely do well. But we're not talking about one show. We're talking about a lot of different kinds of media, from documentaries to movies to artists playing, right? So I think that is a big concern. But in general, I do think it's good for the AV industry. We're exposing a lot of different people, including young folks, into a whole world of immersive video and immersive content, which I think is just fantastic. So I'm all for it. We have to kind of wait and see the cost of building these things, the cost of prices, which will inadvertently be good or bad depending on the location. But in general, I think it's a good idea. I'm actually looking forward to it. And I'm sure some of the bigger cities will have some, and they will do well. And I can also see them taking these to even a virtual museum, like Chicago Film Museum. Like, you can get to Chicago. The accessibility of this is huge in so many different ways, where there's so many beautiful places that, we can't afford to go to, or just don't have the time to go to. But this is the next best thing. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, and as a St. Louisan, I would lobby for one in St. Louis for two reasons. I don't think we have a 5,000 seat auditorium. Mitchell can kind of throw something at me if we do. We've got a couple 3,000 seaters, but having a 5,000 seater would be really cool, and having this in my backyard would be really cool too. So, not that anybody from MSG is listening to me. Neil, same question here. What can we do to kind of drive the audience engagement and level it up?
Well, first of all, I'd love one in London. We've got the Dome, which I guess is
you
kind of
tried
like
it. No, hang on, time out. They tried to put one in the UK, and y'all said not in my backyard.
We got the Millennium Dome, which, as I say, is half of a sphere, but no, let's not go there. So yeah, it'd be great to have it in London. I think the interesting thing is it's harder to, the world we live in with now TikTok and Instagram and the scroll of doom, trying to get people's attention is really hard. Mm-hmm. And also the fact of, when everybody went to lockdown and everyone sort of sat at home, getting people out to experiential events and to go and physically experience something is hard. And we're always having to up the game. Again, stop the scroll, stop and get people's attention. So the fact of these experiential environments and experiential spaces providing a new experience, again, it was IMAX, and then it was like 3D glasses, and, now the sphere experience is, maybe the next iteration of that. But again, it's constantly trying to one up and to give people a reason to get their bums off the seats at home, get out there and not just listen to and watch something through a little 6-inch screen on their smartphone, but actually go and watch something on a 360-degree, massive display out there. So I love the idea of it. Again, I saw the Sphere when I was out at Infocom last year, or was it whatever? I was there in Vegas for last year. And it's, again, as someone not from America, it was like, wow, this is big. This is Vegas, and this is pretty darn awesome. I do obviously Nvidia's stock price is probably going to go up, because I got it was like 4,000 Nvidia GTX or Quattros or whatever they were powering that thing. So if they're now going to do that in every single large hub in America, Nvidia are going to be very pleased with regards to how many Quadros and RTXs they're selling. But it's a hugely impressive experience. And again, I think as the youth of today need to unlock themselves from watching life through a smartphone screen. You see concerts, they're all sitting there watching an amazing concert through a 6-inch screen on their smartphone. Put your bloody phones away and actually go and spend some money and have that experience with your eyeballs, not through a bloody screen on a phone. So I'm absolutely for it. I think it's great.
Neil,
I don't know what's next though. I don't know. Where do we go from? How do we go from Sphere? Is it going to be like a dodecahedron? Is the next? I don't know. Again, it's
or a holodeck.
There you go.
Really quickly, because the price has been mentioned a couple of times. The original Sphere, the one in Vegas, a little over $2 billion. And if I am not a math person, so don't you can correct me if you'd like. But roughly, if 5,000 is 1/4 of 20,000, which I think the math is correct there, then 1/4 of $2 billion is roughly 500 million.
Wow.
Yeah, there are some communities where that is going to be cost prohibitive. I think a little bit to Nathan's point, but there are some communities where that'll be perfectly fine.
But the land that would take to put it to, where are you going to find?
Well, it's a fourth of the size, so
it's still pretty.
I mean, again, back to St. Louis. There's a
you
giant.
have the land.
There's a giant. I have the perfect land. There is a giant football stadium in downtown St. Louis, and we know how to have a football team. So
I feel like we should
we
start
do
a
have an arena
GoFundMe
team
page right now to make sure.
We're not talking about soccer, are we? Just
it's the Battle Hawks.
Check that.
We do have a team. It's the Battle Hawks. I have local friends who.
It's not soccer.
Not a round ball.
Not soccer.
Just checking.
Yeah.
We call it soccer over here, Neil.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Just checking.
all right, last story before I get myself in really good trouble. NETGEAR, our friends over at NETGEAR, the only guy in the AV industry that I know that has an Emmy, John Hinkle, works for NETGEAR. NETGEAR is doubling down on its broadcast and pro AV strategy by joining the DPP, the global community of media and technology leaders. The move strengthens NETGEAR's position as a key innovator in content creation and distribution, with strong focus on AV over IP and ST2110 standards. Yes, we're going to talk about standards for a second. By simplifying network configuration within its purpose-built AVOS and offering direct engineering support, NETGEAR is filling the gap left as traditional enterprise switch providers pivot toward other IT trends. With nearly 400 AV partners and now a member of DPP's company network, NETGEAR is setting themselves up to play a central role in shaping the future of the digital media infrastructure. Nathan, I said at the start of this that the reason I grabbed this was because I'm going to NAB. Our buddy Chris Netto is going to NAB. Broadcast and AV are converging a bit like we talked about 20 years ago, AV and IT.
Right.
There's a couple different things happening with that. But when it comes to whether it's ST2110, it's IPMX, which I have let my feelings known about IPMX ad nauseum. I am going to go see them at NAB. But you've got all these standards. What challenges still exist in really getting production level video and production level audio across the network, in corporate and in broadcast?
So I'll give you an example, just how I look at it, because I'm not a pro user of this, but I already have a use case for this. So in general, it's lights out today when you don't use a switch that knows anything about the protocols and the multicast that you're doing, right?
Yep.
So I use Miva cores because, obviously we make them. So when I'm doing mobile podcasts, I'm bringing in NETGEAR switch because I've been using NETGEAR for a while. So this from the get-go, they're reliable. and they're cost effective, right? People know that about NETGEAR. They've been using. We all have them. Like I have an insane amount of ports in my house, but every now and then I'm like, I should have run a couple more Ethernet runs. So I basically have another uplink switch there, and it's a NETGEAR. But when I do have it out there, and I'm in the field, like setting up an actual podcast studio temporarily, I have no idea how these packets are actually doing. I don't know if it's optimized. It'll tell you maybe in the software, but now having that ability full stack, I have customers that have multiple floors where they film in real time, right? It'd be nice to actually have switches that can tell you, hey, listen, this is not optimized. You have too much data going through. The audio is not going to work. Like all that rich data, just kind of like what NetSpeak is doing. It's NetSpeak, right? Yeah, NetSpeak's doing on the back end side. Now we can have that intelligence built at the network layer and the application layer because it understands what's happening on that multicast. So to me, I'm really excited about it. I would think that this is much more valuable for larger sets of cameras and all these audio equipment that's going on one network in a bigger production. But I can totally see me even with 3 cameras using, why would I not buy a switch that can now intelligently manage my traffic for me so that to make sure my audio and video is good. So for me, it's a no-brainer. And I'm glad they have smaller switches like 8 ports all the way up to the larger closets. So for broadcast studios, they can just put these all in, and now they know that they can monitor their network traffic effectively. And of course, you could have done this with bigger switches in the past, but those were not made for AV. These are made for AV.
And they were
so
more
it's purpose
expensive
built.
because they were bigger.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
They were almost cost prohibitive.
Very cost prohibitive. Yeah. We're talking about thousands of dollars for like a 12-port switch, right? And that's probably your standard, amount of cameras you're going to connect anyway.
Neil, same kind of question here is we're adding more and more standards, more and more technologies, how do we get these folks to kind of get together and get, whether it's folks like me and Nathan and you who do, kind of mobile, but also the permanent, as much as we can call that, permanent installations like broadcast and corporate productions.
Yeah, I think NETGEAR done an amazing job to niche down in this space. I mean, clearly there's a very large elephant in the network space that no one's going to get fired for putting in their network switches and routers, as you would call them. But again, what NETGEAR have done is really kind of dedicated a complete division into this AV space that then gives customers and partners that confidence that if they're going to go and deploy an AV network, that it's going to be able to deliver on that. And the key things around multicast is the ability to do things like VLAN tagging and being able to support IGMP to be able to make sure that you can segment that multicast traffic away from traditional data packets, but also to be able to make sure that you get synchronization of audio and video and all of that great stuff on the back end. And NETGEAR have really done a great job of doing that. In addition to that, if a multicast hits a switch and then becomes a broadcast, then you've got a real problem because then every single switch on your port is going to then be hit by a video stream. And we're not talking about the odd bit of a print job or a file transfer here. This is real time, big, large bandwidth streams and packets that need that reliability and resilience, because any dropout and any packet loss is going to be then glitch, and no one wants that. And again, this is meant to be replacing traditional cable technologies, SDI and component
HDMI,
video and things
DVI.
like that. In HDMI, yeah, absolutely, and DVI in those kind of spaces, and things like, as you said, NDI and the SMPTE standards. Really are allowing us to move away from physical cabling, physical matrix switching, and be able to just use traditional IP networking. And again, I absolutely applaud the guys at NETGEAR, because what they're doing is they're allowing all that IT, Ethernet, OSI model, and IGMP and multicast, and all that clever IT techie stuff through their wizard front end and simplification, make all of that accessible to the AV and UC and broadcast industry, so that someone who is a broadcast engineer or a technology officer can just go in there and go, I want to run a stream from here to here. I go next, finish, bang, I've got my system set up and I'm good, and I know that it's all going to work. And I think NETGEAR have done a great job of again, concentrating on that space, while others are maybe looking at more of okay, we're going to deploy this into your office as your backbone network with, wireless and security and firewalls and all the rest of it. And NETGEAR do that really well as well. But the fact they're the only vendor that I know of in the networking space that have this dedicated AV division and understand it, but also then have the partnerships with the vendors as well. So, they partner up with the Shores, the Sennheisers, the QSCs and, Lightware and all those other vendors to be able to make sure that they are certified and they know where the packets are coming from, how to tag them, and make sure that they are end-to-end resilient and delivered how they go onto the network, how they go off the network as well. So,
hey, by the way, I just want to add real quick. So, one thing I forgot is that I'm sure these have PoE as well, right, Tim? I didn't go into the specs, but I would imagine so. So, for cameras that I'm using, they're all PoE. So now you're basically using one cable to power up your camera the entire time and get the best possible quality audio and video without any dropouts, right? Unless, of course, it'll tell you if you're dropping out. And by the way, since I also do production while I'm filming, filming myself in a podcast, which is a little weird. Sometimes I get really
weird. That's not weird at all.
It's weird. Come on, just admit it.
You look great.
But though,
I've been doing it for 14 years, dude.
The strange part is when you're watching the broadcast and all of a sudden you see like a trail, like the mouth's not moving right, and you're like, what's happening with the network, right? It's usually because you've congested the entire network, even though it's a small switch. It was not meant for AV. It was meant for IP, right? So this kind of alleviates all those problems, gives you kind of the best path for your cameras and your audio systems to work. So I just want to add that in there too.
Jennifer, we'll take a slight detour here. One of the things about this article that kind of drove that one of the things that about this article it brought to mind the concept of interoperability, and that is a holy grail, and is one of my issues that I have with IPMX, but that's a whole different conversation. How do we drive interoperability? How do we get real interoperability, either on the broadcast side or the AV side, or both?
It's just going to take everybody working together, right, to ensure that everything's there, that we're all communicating, that we're all talking. With so much of the AV equipment going onto networks and being on networks, and that whole verge of AVIT now. AV is audio, it's video. It doesn't matter if it's audio in a conference room. It doesn't matter if it's audio on a live event stage. It doesn't matter if it's audio in broadcast. Audio, visual is audio, is visual, right? It's everything together. So all of these little tiny segments of things are not really tiny segments of things. Everything is fully together. So we've got to start looking at it that way of it's all audio, it's all visual or video, it's all going to eventually come together, so everything should all be working together. That's just...
It's a good place to stop. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Neil Fluester, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to go find me. Neil Fluester, Fluester. I'm sure it's in the show notes. Comment below, tag, and all that good stuff. And LinkedIn probably the best place. I do hang on other places, but
you don't want to mention those.
This is a family program.
Not yet.
Jennifer Weaver, how do people connect with you?
So you can get me at Jennifer at Laia, LAI-TechNA.com. So that's Laia Technologies. Love for you to check out my podcast too on AVNation. You can see me there. Or on LinkedIn. I am very much a LinkedIn person, so it's just Jennifer Weaver on LinkedIn.
And what is the name of your podcast?
My podcast is AV Career Masterminds. So anybody out there that's looking, wants to talk?
Love it.
I would love to talk to you and have you on.
I think everybody on this show has had a podcast once or twice in their entire life. Speaking of which, Nathan Coutinho from Logitech. How do people connect with you? But how do we get your podcast?
So podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. It's also shorts on LinkedIn and then on YouTube as well. But it's called Unscripted. So if you look up Unscripted in my name, you should be able to find it. But best place to reach me is LinkedIn. So just linkedin.com/in/Nathan Coutinho. You probably will have my name spelt in the description of your podcast. So would love to connect and answer questions.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. Do not follow me on any socials. If you want to read things about that have nothing to do with AV that I write, you can follow me on LinkedIn. How about that? you can do that.
I'm just going to say, Tim's blogs on LinkedIn are blooming amazing. They're small, concise, love them. So big shout out to what you're doing there, Tim, because again, all of us are just making idiots of ourselves on video, but you're actually putting out some really nice written blogs on a regular basis on LinkedIn. So I would urge anybody that's listening to this to go and check out your written blogs on LinkedIn, because I think they're awesome. So kudos to you. Well,
thank you very much, sir. And I will have to give you a 20-pound note or something when I see you next. What Neil said, but go by the website if you would, please. You flustered me, Flooster. By the website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program, you'll find Jennifer's program, and a host of others, including a brand new EdTech with Aaron Mayer Moran, looking at counterfeit AV. That was a big story, and it continues to be a big one. So listen to the really smart folks from higher education talk about that. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're tired of looking at my face, you can just go listen to us over on podcast, just like Nathan said, wherever you find podcasts. And if you're just listening to us and you want to see all of us, you can find us on YouTube. So either way, go the opposite direction. I mentioned the fact that I was at Enterprise Connect. You can also go by the website and check out all of our coverage of Enterprise Connect 2025. By the time this airs, Mitchell should have most of those up and running. And then not 2 weeks after that, we'll be going to Vegas for NAB 2025. You can check that coverage as well. But all that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.